So thanks to all of you for joining us today. We're coast to coast across Canada, and we have a wonderful program for you to learn about resilience. And one of the first people that we must say thank you to also and recognize the resilience of, and that's our Indigenous sisters and brothers. They've been looking after our land for tens of thousands of years. And now we realize that we are all treaty people, and we're very grateful for the leadership and the resilience of our Indigenous sisters and brothers. We also have today another resilient person who I met just through the asking of a question when he registered. We've not chatted, but his name is Mark Black, and he is a heart and double lung transplant who is running marathons. So our salute to Mark Black for being resilient in a medical and an intellectual, mental way as well, and for teaching so many people about resilience, both by word, but also by deed. Who else has been very resilient is the sponsors of the Famous Five Foundation over the past 16 years. So actually it's 24 years when we started the Famous Five Foundation. And it's on behalf of the current board that I welcome you all today, particularly our Director of Events, Preeta Kalar. It's the spirit of the Famous Five that we're doing these events, and that we are happy to say that once again, our title sponsor from our Enbridge Speaker Series has now become our presenting sponsor for the virtual Pink Teas of this year. It's my pleasure to introduce you to Jennifer Vari, who is the Director of the Corporate Social Responsibility and Community Investment Portfolio at Enbridge, a very important job both within Enbridge and of course in the community. With their support, so many charities and not-for-profits have been able to offer healing, have been able to offer support, have been able to try new things in the community. And so with Famous Five Foundation, we've been able to do a speaker series in Calgary, in Ottawa, in Sarnia, Fort McMurray, and also in Edmonton. Currently, we're just Calgary, Ottawa, and Sarnia, but there will be plans for expansion. And so our thanks to Enbridge, and our thanks particularly, Jennifer, to you and your team for your work within the community. And now it's over to you to introduce our conversationalists, our special guests of today. Jennifer.
Thank you, Frances. I'm honored to join you today on behalf of Enbridge to introduce the fourth speaker in the virtual Pink Tea Conversations. Today, our guests will be talking about resiliency and creativity. And this event itself, a virtual Pink Tea, is a great example of turning the challenge of the pandemic to an opportunity to bring people together from across Canada to listen, to learn, and to be inspired by truly amazing Canadian women. It exemplifies the vision of the Famous Five Foundation in supporting and championing Canada's female leaders. And as a company deeply committed to diversity and inclusion, Enbridge is proud to have supported the foundation for nearly 20 years and to celebrate the legacy of the Famous Five. I'd also like to take this opportunity to acknowledge the date of today's event and all those impacted by the tragic events of September 11th, 2001. We're privileged today to hear from someone with a connection to that terrible day and a personal story of helping people and organizations find a path forward. Janice Price is in many ways a role model for resilience. Using creativity and innovation, she skillfully employed the arts to overcome crises and rebuild communities in the wake of the 9/11 attacks in New York, the SARS epidemic in Toronto, and now the global COVID-19 pandemic impacting us all. Janice has over 30 years experience as a senior executive in leadership roles in the arts and entertainment sector in Canada and the United States. She was appointed to her current role as president and CEO of the Banff Centre for Arts and Creativity, a place Jan Arden calls one of the best places on earth, in March 2015. Prior to her appointment to the Banff Centre, Janice's outstanding work at Roy Thomson Hall, Massey Hall, and the Stratford Festival in Canada led to leadership positions with major American arts organizations, such as the Kimmel Center for the Performing Arts in Philadelphia and Lincoln Center in New York. In 2006, Janice returned to Canada to launch Luminato, which has become one of North America's largest and most respected arts festivals. Numerous national and international arts sector boards, such as the Governor General's Leadership Conference, have benefited from Janice's service. She currently sits on the Board of Business for the Arts, as well as the Council of Post-Secondary Presidents of Alberta. And Janice was named one of Canada's most powerful women in 2018. Today's conversation will be led by Vanessa Yurchesyn, all the way from Halifax, Nova Scotia. Vanessa is a unique combination of registered dietitian with an MBA in innovation leadership. In her day job, she's account manager at Complete Purchasing Services. She's also active as a board member. She's served on the board of directors for provincial dietetic regulatory bodies and is currently a board director on both the Mount St. Vincent University Alumni Association and the ALS Society of New Brunswick and Nova Scotia. She's a volunteer and keen ambassador for the Famous Five Foundation in Atlantic Canada. In 2019, she organized a pink tea with the Lieutenant Governor of Nova Scotia at Government House in Halifax to mark the 90th anniversary of the Person's Case, a really successful event to celebrate the achievements of the Famous Five and their legacy for women in Nova Scotia and across Canada. Janice and Vanessa are eager to start the conversation, and I'm very excited to learn from them. So on behalf of Enbridge, thank you for joining today's Pink Tea. I know we're in for an empowering conversation.
Jennifer, and a big thank you to Enbridge for their ongoing support. On behalf of the Famous Five Foundation, we sincerely appreciate it. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for being here with us today. I know we have people from coast to coast with us, so that's very exciting. There will hopefully be an opportunity toward the end of our conversation for us to take some live audience questions, so be sure to type those into the chat box should you have any as we go. So Janice, it is truly a pleasure to be here with you today. I'm looking forward to getting our Pink Tea conversation started and allowing our audience to get to know your approach to resilience and how you've become a leading female. So if you're ready, let's jump right in. So Janice, you are the current president and CEO of the Banff Centre for Arts and Creativity and have been since 2015. Most would likely know that it is Canada's largest postgraduate arts and leadership training institution. But can you tell us what makes it unique?
Absolutely. One component is that we're 87 years old. So Banff Centre was established in the Great Depression. So yet another example of how arts and culture has been used during or in spite of challenging times as part of the response and resilience imperative. We deliver training programs across all artistic disciplines, including music, theater, dance, literary arts, visual arts, opera, media and digital arts, along with, of course, Indigenous arts and Indigenous leadership programs and cultural leadership programs. And we do this breadth of work on our 42-acre campus for both emerging and established artists on beautiful Treaty 7 territory, home of the Stoney Nakoda, the Tsuut'ina, and the Blackfoot Nations in Canada's first national park and a UNESCO World Heritage Site. So what a privilege to do this work in beautiful Banff, where our artists are inspired by the setting, while also working with outstanding faculty from across Canada and around the globe.
Thanks, Janice. It sounds like a wonderful place to be. I love Banff, and next time I'm out, I'll definitely have to come by for a visit. So I listened to the Walrus talk that you delivered in November 2015 on the topic of resilience. And in that talk, you shared some challenges in your career that called for you to be particularly resilient. And one of those examples was New York City and 9/11. So before I ask you a question about this, I definitely want to take a moment to recognize that today is September 11th. And of course, that must bring some unpleasant feelings and memories to mind. So thank you for being resilient here today with us, despite the emotions that this day brings for you. Could you share with us what you did to help New York City overcome 9/11?
Yeah, thanks for acknowledging that. It really is an example of how sometimes these really traumatic events absolutely do impact you kind of psychically in a way that sometimes unbeknownst to you, it kind of sneaks up on us, and we remember that we're feeling some trauma from that time. And especially for me on this day, at first I wondered when I was asked if I would talk today, and I thought, oh, on this day of all days. And then I decided, as you kind of alluded, Vanessa, that it's actually the perfect day. It's the perfect day because it gives me a chance to share again with people not only what happened, and to honor obviously all those who were lost and who did such incredible work on that day, but to have the opportunity to use it as an example of resilience, given what we're going through right now. I'll say that obviously a lot of what I'm going to say comes from my perspective as a 40-year arts and culture worker, arts and entertainment worker. So in New York City, it was actually not a big challenge to look naturally to the power of the arts and its ability to convene communities and to find respite, of course, in beauty and artistic expression, even during a and shock and devastation. New York is certainly one of the cultural capitals of the world, with easy access to artists, even when they could not travel around the globe, as had been planned. And we had a mayor, Rudy Giuliani, who really was a tremendous force for good in those times. He was a passionate arts lover, very supportive of arts and culture as contributors to quality of life, to economic impact, part of the New York City brand globally, of course, from commercial Broadway to off-Broadway to nonprofit performing arts. And he was in regular contact with me and my amazing board chair, opera star Beverly Sills, at the time, and really immediately discussed the critical role of the arts in recovery of the city, psychologically, spiritually, and economically. So I remember working really hard after having basically sent everyone home on that day. We had students, School of American Ballet or high school age students, Juilliard School, university age students, staff from 11 resident companies, from the Metropolitan Opera to New York City Ballet, New York Philharmonic, and we had to basically evacuate everyone off the campus. I actually witnessed live the planes strike the towers on the TVs in my office, because I was preparing for a meeting with the New York Times that day to talk about our Lincoln Center fall season, interestingly. So what was interesting to me, and I've remembered it often, and it's for the significance of artistic expression during these times, is then President Bush put out a call for a national day of prayer, a vigil across the country on the Friday immediately following the Tuesday of 9/11. And I remember thinking, are people going to come, like, even to that iconic plaza at Lincoln Center with the fountain, the one we all know from so many movies and from visiting New York? And we prepared with the operations team. We were down to a very small team at that point in time. And we prepared, and we had candles, and people brought their own candles. They knew it was going to be a vigil. And a few things struck me. How many people came to that plaza, which demonstrated to me the need for community and to be together in a time like that. And it was silent. There was no speeches. There was no political overtone. It was just a silent vigil with candles and some spontaneous singing. And after about an hour, people started to peter away or disperse. So that's a big memory for me on how we were asked to rise to the occasion. And that led then on only the Sunday after 9/11, believe it or not, I had kind of the same reaction and concern about the next initiative was, again, at the request of the mayor, open the 2,500 seat concert hall and do a free concert, which would be broadcast by National Public Radio and our famed Emerson String Quartet. They're New York City residents. They happen to still be in the city because they were prevented from flying to a prearranged European gig. And they came in the concert hall and played a 90-minute concert. I wrote a speech for Beverly to give before on the radio. And I wondered if people would attend. And of course, they came and they filled the concert hall. So this really has only reinforced to me, and I've of course remembered it for almost 20 years now. And we can discuss it in connection with our current pandemic situation, just how much the arts are essential to, comfort, sustain, bring joy and beauty to people, in times of crisis and distress.
That's powerful. And certainly, what you said really resonated, that power of the artistic spaces to bring people together, and that positive feel of relationships, or just that connectivity between people at such a time. And I think, positive relationships are certainly a resilience builder, because sometimes people think of resilience as, being independent or stoic or going at something alone. Opposite. We need each other, and we need that strength in numbers. So that's so wonderful that those spaces allowed that to happen, and allowed people to bounce back from that difficult time. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. So you are the founding CEO of the Luminato Festival was it 2007 or 2006 to 2015?
I arrived in 2006 back to Toronto, my original home, after a decade in the US, in New York and then Philadelphia in 2006. And the first festival took place in 2007.
Okay, perfect. And so could you share how your leadership with that festival helped Toronto overcome SARS?
Yeah, I'm fond of saying there were two motivations for the founding of the Luminato Festival. One was very positive, which was that the city, the province had invested $1 billion in what they called the cultural super build. So we had a dozen new or renovated, beautiful cultural spaces, really recognition of the robust cultural vibrancy of Toronto, the fourth largest city in North America, and really an incredibly important cultural destination for visitors and tourists and locals alike. And of course, SARS arrived, and Toronto was one of the only cities then that sadly also did experience, as we've seen in COVID, over 40 deaths from SARS, many in the healthcare professions, sadly. And the WHO, basically a do not go directive that cost the city multi-millions of dollars in hospitality and tourism jobs and revenue and income. So that was the bad incident, along with the fact that the city had just completed this incredible investment in arts and culture spaces. So when two different parts of city management came together, all the different kinds of arts and culture groups and business groups and the kinds of groups we're seeing convening now around COVID, and said, what are the things we can do to bring people back to Toronto? I'm ecstatic to say one of those, of course, was an international arts festival. So I was living and working in the United States as a Toronto native, and got this call about an international arts festival that was gaining some traction and had some funding. And I arrived back as employee number one. So part of the resilience, less resilience than classic startup kind of challenges around, I need to find staff, I need to find an office, I pulled on my network, we pulled people together. We had 9 months to put together an $11 million festival that was really about putting a spotlight back on Toronto as a city that had so much to offer in its cultural community. So another example of looking to arts and culture as a way to revitalize and restore and make your city resilient in times of need.
That's wonderful, and definitely the sunshine after the storm, for sure. So love that. So based on what you just shared with those two examples, and knowing about you, I know you're used to thinking big. So can you share with us how today you're being resilient and creating an environment of proactive resilience at the Banff Centre to navigate these uncharted waters and the constant uncertainty that this COVID pandemic is bringing us today?
Absolutely. I think really to answer the question, I'm going to have to slide into some discussion of what is resilience? What does it actually mean? From the dictionary definition to the believe I would convey it after my years of experience. We, of course, like so many others, we kind of had a triple whammy. We're in kind of a series of different activities and businesses here at Banff Center. So, of course, we're an arts training and presentation and creation organization. We're a post-secondary institution. We are a conference and hospitality center where you can come and have an event here at Banff Center in this beautiful setting, and that generates revenue. It's a social enterprise that supports our core mission. And we're also impacted, of course, by the tourism sector. So I just rhymed off 4 sectors, all of which were deeply negatively impacted by COVID. And on March 13th, I was in a meeting in Edmonton, actually, with the Minister of Advanced Education, and the decision was made that our university campuses had to close for students. And obviously, many of the staff and faculty also said, well, we would also now prefer to work from home. I think a pandemic was just declared. In 1 week, 100% of our revenue generating conference and hospitality business disappeared from our books. A year's worth of business gone in a week. So we had to respond immediately to that. We had to really tell our staff that we believed they should work from home. We also then had Parks Canada close the park. So we literally were living, it kind of reminded me of being in Manhattan on 9/11. We were locked in a way. Even if you went to Canmore to buy some groceries when you came back into Banff, you had to prove that you were a resident. They were actually, the police were turning people away at the entrance to Banff. So all of that, of course, struck at the heart of our business. I'm so grateful to our corporate partners, our government of Alberta, our government of Canada, our public sector and our corporate partners and our donors remained very faithful and continue to help support us. But we had lost such a significant part of our business that we were forced to lay off a number of our staff, like many of the other businesses and arts organizations you've heard about. So the response really was work from home. Think about how we're going to deliver programs in some way, shape, or form, ideally online, share our existing content and create content we would have delivered on our campus in a manner that could be shared online. And these are all tactics you heard from other similar type of organizations as they responded to the crisis. I will say we've had numerous staff meetings along the way. And there's some lessons we've learned as well that I'd be willing to share around, what we might do differently or how to prepare for a future, hopefully not, but a future similar kind of crisis. I have, it's really interesting. I have a much smaller staff who say they're actually collaborating more. So it's, even with the challenges of having to do it through technology rather than in person, working in teams and collaborating together really has been highlighted in this time, which I think is a slight positive. And also the fact that, we've really been able to spotlight, I think, more of our close to home artists, our close community, and try to work with them to give them some opportunities as well to be showcased.
Definitely some silver linings despite the challenges. And I think what you shared certainly demonstrates that you're able to remain calm. You sound calm about it all and allow yourself to be present despite the challenges. And I'm confident, and I know many people are, that your strong leadership will see the Banff Center bounce back from this. We had a couple of audience questions that came in over the last few days that I felt flowed nicely from what you just said. So I'll ask those now if that's okay with you. So
Sure.
one of them was, how do we create an environment to move forward safely while taking risks to create a new way of being? So, you know, you could say that in context of COVID, or if you'd like to use another example, I think that could work too.
Yeah, I guess one of the key differences for me from what we talked about with Lincoln Center even, or the challenges of making a statement with Luminato that, you know, Toronto is open and we're all talking about how do we send the signal we're open, is the continued uncertainty. So traumatic and tragic though it was, and we weren't sure, I have to admit, for at least a day or two, but we definitely knew on 9/11 that the incident had occurred and that at least that piece of it was done, and we moved immediately into recovery. Here, it's a much bigger challenge. How do we move forward safely is really about all the things you're seeing being rolled out across the country. And I am reminded again, another kind of analogy to 9/11. There are things we do now at airports that we take for granted that people forget came about because of 9/11. And I think there are things, you can kiss goodbye ever eating at a buffet again, for example. There's things we're now going to do in the way we reopen our businesses and respond and work to have people feel safe, safe in every sense of the word, that 2 years from now we'll take for granted. And our children will grow up with those as the norm. And so I think that's one answer to the how do we move forward. I think the other is I have a wonderful member of my team, a wonderful young woman, and I've adopted a phrase she has introduced to me that is forced opportunity. So we've all had to kind of adapt in a way where you see, yes, you're forced because of a circumstance to have to figure out how to do more digitally, how to welcome people back safely. But in that is the opportunity. We've put programs up online that normally attract hundreds, or in the case of our Mountain Film Festival, thousands of people to our campus. As we are forced to do a more comprehensive version of those programs online, we're getting audiences from around the world that frankly we probably could have and should have been potentially thinking about all along. But we all get focused on doing our business the way we do our business. And so I think one of the ways we're going to move forward is in a peculiar way. There is now a global conversation happening and a global appetite to consume arts in a different way. And it doesn't mean you can't compare that, of course, to being physically in a museum or being in a concert hall. But I think we're learning it's much closer to the experience people are willing to partake in than we thought. And so we could grow in those areas. That's one example, you know, of moving forward as we think about what is resilience, you know, what are the skills required to be resilient?
Yeah, I love that. And I think I know myself even, we kind of tended to grieve the past of what life was before the pandemic. And you know, your example of let's look at other ways we can take in the arts, and if that's virtually, then that's our new normal, right? It's
exactly
it's what we need to do.
Embrace your forced opportunities, people.
Right. I love that forced opportunity.
and I'll share with you. You know, I actually do embrace the dictionary definition of resilience, and I think it's worth kind of sharing today. I think it's relevant really to our current pandemic challenge, which is resilience is the capacity of a system, enterprise, or person to maintain its core purpose and integrity in the face of dramatically changed circumstances. That's
a great definition.
exactly what we're going through right now. The capacity of a system, enterprise, or person to maintain its core purpose and integrity in the face of dramatically changed circumstances. So I think, you know, I have a list of words, acceptance being one of them, because you just talked about we have to embrace it and accept it. There's a really well-worn quote, but it is one that I really treasure from FDR, courage, which of course is first on my list of qualities of resilience. Courage is not the absence of fear, but rather the assessment that something else is more important than fear. So I talk a lot when I'm asked to speak to groups about, you know, usually younger, about to launch their careers, young people, you know, about what we've all heard about. You have to have a passion for what you do. It's important to feel passionate and committed to what you're doing. But that's where that phrase, something is more important than fear. And so, you know, that leads me to, you know, kind of my list of qualities of resilience. We've had to use all these skills, and we've had to adapt them to our current situation. So I'll expand on some of these if anyone wants me to. I'm keen to hear others' experiences as well. But the list for me of what demonstrates resilience includes courage, calmness, listening, compassion, transparency, acceptance, willingness to fail, humor, stamina, and self-care.
I just quickly jotted all those down.
That's a lot, I
that.
know, but you know, I just listed courage, we have discussed, calmness, of course. You cannot, you really have to bring focus and a steady hand to these challenges. Listening so that you're aware how others are responding and what needs they may have or what ideas they may have, rather than just charging ahead thinking you have all the answers. Compassion, for sure. We've had a terrible time here at Banff Center, having to say goodbye to so many colleagues. And I've had conversations with some team members who really have been, of course, emotional about that and traumatized, but also kind of worried about their colleagues and helping them through a series of emotions. And one of the pieces of advice I gave was, you know, you do have to let people be angry or sad or upset. Like, it's not your job to stop them feeling what they're feeling. You really have to let them feel that and just accept it and know it's it is part of being compassionate. Transparency, acceptance, I've touched on. Willingness to fail. You know, part of resilience is, well, how are we going to recover? Part of the way we're going to recover is trying new things. And sometimes those things won't work. And we have to together just hold together and say, you know, if we're going to get through this, maybe we should try this, maybe we should try that, and just allow ourselves to try to make those things happen. And if they don't work, they don't work. Keep going. Humor. I know it sounds crazy because, you know, you're all in crisis mode, but you still have to be able to laugh about certain things or share a joke or see sometimes the humor in some of the failures. And then self-care, of course, which we all need to do better at. But these are very, very challenging times. We get tired. I'm tired. It's probably even more tired when you have to do all your meetings via Zoom. But you do have to, I'm trying to take, you know, mental health walks through the beautiful streets of Banff when I can. So those are just some of my thoughts on what does being resilient mean?
Well, that's certainly a wonderful list. And, And I know our listeners probably jotted all those down as well, and we'll think about those even more detail. But those are certainly the qualities to build resilience. Or building or cultivating that resilience takes time. But they're all learned qualities. We can all be resilient based on that list that you shared. And I think particularly the acceptance piece, I'm a big believer in that. If you don't accept your current reality, how are you supposed to pivot or adapt and move forward? If you're grieving a past or looking too much into the future, you have to be present and accept. So thank you for sharing that. So listening to what you have shared, I think it's obvious that you're a believer in living it in order to build that resilience, living those experiences. But do you think experience is the only way to be resilient, or how else can we look to build these qualities?
I think there's levels of resilience that we're all going to be required to evidence in our life. So we're going through, and the examples I've given are extreme examples. And I hope that living through them isn't the only way. Some of our people who are with us here today have the opportunity to learn how to be resilient. There can be levels of challenge that we all go through in our lives and in our careers or in our personal lives that will require resilience. But yes, living through some experiences that require you to bring some of those qualities I just mentioned to the table is helpful. But I would add to those observation. Mm-hmm. So even without living through some of the worst crises, although I did observe a lot of people on 9/11 and took some great lessons from that, but I really encourage people to observe the leaders around them. And you can learn through observing the behavior of others. And so I do think, and I hope that I'm modeling some good behavior to some of my teams during this time in the way that we have collectively been dealing with this crisis. And I guess the add-on to that, I would say, and again, I encourage people to try to be open and accessible, is to ask questions. Why did you make that decision? Or how did you come to that decision? So I really encourage, and especially, I hate to say this, but I think the women who are on this, joining us for this chat today, really don't be afraid to question your leaders around how they make the decisions they make and what processes they go through. So observe people and question the behavior that you think is behavior that is a positive model for you.
Oh, that's words of wisdom, certainly. And I kind of didn't even think of that, but the observation part, and I think it's something we probably do, but asking questions. And, as a young professional, I sometimes would be fearful to ask, how did you come to that, decision to my leadership team? But that's wonderful. And I know leaders are happy to share that, and there's great learnings we could take from that. So, we talked about positive relationships and building resilience, and, you kind of alluded to there, how you are a role model, and I know you are to many people. Mm-hmm. And I also know that mentoring is very important to you. So can you tell us a little bit about how some mentors or role models in your life had a positive influence on your career over the years?
Yeah, I've been blessed with a few that stand out. I alluded earlier to Beverly Sales, and was fortunate that I had almost 4 years before we went through 9/11 together to work with her and learn from her and observe the way she managed the organization. She was the volunteer chair of Lincoln Center, and there was a president who also was a wonderful man and mentor to me, the person who hired me. But in an organization as large as Lincoln Center, the chair is actually in the office 4 days of the week and plays a really huge role, especially given the considerable amount of fundraising required. She was an incredible fundraiser. She taught me a lot. I have a couple of wonderful Beverly Sills quotes. Older people on this call or real opera fans will remember Beverly as one of the first real American-born opera stars. And she popularized opera by going on Sesame Street and the Carol Burnett Show, and she really was a fan of making opera accessible to everyone. Her nickname was Bubbles, and it's partly because she had this just incredibly positive personality. And I was working at Lincoln Center when an older executive than me, who'd been there for quite a long time, said to her one day within my hearing at a meeting, Beverly, how is it that you are always so happy? And she said, and she had a very challenging life. She had 2 special needs children at the time I knew Beverly. Her husband was ill, and truly, she came into the office every day, and it seemed like she was just so happy. And she said, you know, I don't have to be happy to be cheerful. So she was making a choice to be able to actually evidence really positive, cheerful behavior, humor, fun in the workplace, regardless of what was going on in her personal life. And I really always remember that phrase. She was a really strong and resilient woman. I learned a lot from her. And prior to moving to Lincoln Center, I worked for 5 years at the Stratford Festival in Ontario. And very early in his tenure, in fact, I wrote the press release saying he'd be the next artistic director, Richard Manette. Amazing young, dynamic artistic director of the Stratford Festival. He was a great mentor in that he had this insatiable curiosity. He would ask the cab driver, the bartender, the stage door guy, I have this idea, what do you think? Like, he really demonstrated to me the value of asking people for their points of view on things and not thinking only experts had all the answers, and testing his ideas, and just being a really curious, wonderful person to learn from and be with. And I'm very committed to mentoring. I'm particularly focused, of course, on mentoring young women. And I'm on the Diversity Council of the Women's Executive Network and was able to be a wisdom mentor there. So I think it's really important to try to pass on and be open to help others advance in their careers.
And, you know, mentorship is certainly a two-way street. So, you know, you've taken so much and from your mentors over the years. So have you taken anything you've received and brought it to your mentees, and how do you mentor others? What's your approach?
I accept opportunities to speak to people like this, a lot of university campuses and women's groups and Rotary clubs, every chance I get to talk about what does it take to be a leader. And after I was named one of Canada's top 100 most powerful women, that wonderful award from Women's Executive Network, yes, they kindly offered 10 very low priced memberships to the organizations of every woman who had been named in the top 100 that year. And my organization took advantage of that. And I created a mini top women. And from every department in my organization, we identified 10 women leaders and emerging leaders. And we created our own Women in Leadership mini network. And we meet about once a quarter and bring in guest speakers and share our experiences and talk together about what does it take to advance your career and be a woman leader.
And I'm sure that's so wonderful for retention, because those young leaders they're craving that, and you're providing it. And, you know, I'm sure they're getting such value out of that program.
And they're learning from each other. I really think we need to also recognize and acknowledge, and we're moving in that direction with the group I created at Banff, that mentoring can happen across groups and across cohorts. They can share their diverse experiences, even if they're at the same point in their career or they're the same age, within different sectors of their business. that is enriching for everyone. So, mentoring isn't just a top-down exercise. Increasingly, I think it is about sharing across a wider group. And in our case, with our group, and we have a wonderful member of that BAMF Center group I spoke about, who heads our Indigenous leadership programs. And so she's been able to bring the perspective as well of looking at this work through an Indigenous right relations and Indigenous wisdom lens. So that's mentoring to me. My mentees mentor me in many ways. You just never stop learning.
Yes, and that, yeah, like I said, I mean, that value creation is a two-way street. So I love that about mentorship. And so I think we just received the 5-minute warning here. So I think we just may have time for one more question. And I think I have the question. So you've certainly inspired me, and I know many today, and you do that every day. But what is it that inspires you each day?
I am very inspired by the opportunity to really coach and mentor and identify talent, not just within my own organization, but in the broader community that I'm so lucky to be a part of. That's what's so great about my career from the various places I've worked. BAM Center is a place of such creation. And even though they're postgraduate, a lot of the participants are young in their careers still. And so you see them at the early stages of their career, and you see them being established artists. So that for sure gets me up every morning, knowing what we're contributing to. And also what inspires me daily really is finding that deeper purpose in your life. There's a very, it is partly about faith and knowing that you're part of this bigger cosmic, spiritual, however you exercise your own faith or practice. It's really important to me to be aware of that every day and to strive to be a good person and to demonstrate that that faith every day, because otherwise, what's the purpose of living?
Right. For sure, I would definitely agree with that. Any final words of wisdom to share? Any dreams for female artists, arts leaders?
Well, I would say that our sector, arts and entertainment writ large, has always been, actually, I started my career in television, behind the scenes, not in front, in commercial and then public television. So I know that our sector is very welcoming to women, and you can advance in our field. My dream would be, as with so many other businesses, that we begin to see the high number of women in entry and middle and even senior management positions in our sector be given the opportunity to have leadership jobs. So I think that's important. And also, as I think about Canada and our sector and dreams that I have, it is to now really finally tackle all these systemic barriers in training and teaching and advancing more diverse people in our field and across our country.
Certainly the BAMF Center is a shining example of the right organizational culture to do that. So
but we have work to do.
It's good to acknowledge that too.
Yes, we still have a lot of work to do. We have programs that others really, that I'm very proud of, we're all proud of, in exploring and teaching in the diverse space, particularly in our Indigenous space, but we're not reflective still at our board and in our senior leadership as we should be of the diversity of our country.
Right. Always some work to do.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so very much, Janice, for this wonderful conversation. And I think we can all agree that navigating the twists and turns on this journey of life requires us to be resilient. And it's also quite evident after hearing what you shared today that there is tremendous power in artistic spaces. So that will help us continue to thrive into the future. And I know I can speak on behalf of our audience here today that we have thoroughly enjoyed getting to know you, your resilience, and your leadership. And I'm now going to pass it over to Frances Wright, who will provide some concluding remarks. And she may also speak briefly about how our conversation today relates to the Famous Five. So over to you, Frances.
Thank you. Thanks, Vanessa. Thanks, everyone.
No, this was a spectacularly appropriate and 9/11 conversation. And I'm sorry, Janice, you had to go through 9/11 so intimately. And then we've asked you to do it again today. But what nourishing information you have given all of us, and what a spectacular presentation of resilience and why we need to take the steps to get through whatever struggles that we're facing. It absolutely fantastic. As I'm sitting listening to you and Vanessa, thank you too for your splendid questions of Janice. So many other questions raised to Janice, and I know you're very active in the community and responding to people that are building back not only the Banff Centre, but Alberta's economy, and also the fact that you were able to talk about the role of arts in difficult situations is wonderful. You've given me lots of good ideas, I'm sure, as Vanessa has said to the rest of us too. So I'm doubly grateful for you taking time to share your knowledge, but to share your spirit, Janice, to share your energy. It was really, really wonderful. Forced opportunities. That's what we have. We've got a forced opportunity. And in talking about the role of art, I have to just mention a little bit about the Famous Five, in that Henrietta Muir Edwards grew up at a time when women were expected to know how to sew, how to paint, how to sing, how to play the piano, that sort of thing. And for many years, she sold her paintings to generate funds to establish the first women's magazine in Canada. And she generated funds to help establish her prototype of the YWCA in Canada. So arts is used in many different ways, and there are many solutions, aren't there, to obstacles or to tough situations. So today has been a perfect Famous Five Friday, and as we've mentioned starting a couple of months ago, we really want people, and particularly women, to think of Fridays as being Famous Five Fridays, a day with a little extra opportunity, a day that should give you a little more power to see the opportunities and to do something. Like Janice says, you have to sort of survey the situation. You have to get your buddies together. You have to think about ideas. And you have to think about, well, I might fail, but if you don't do something, you don't advance either, do you? So Famous Five Fridays, and our very next Famous Five Friday, well, I think every Friday's Famous Five, but for this series, it's October the 2nd. And on October the 2nd, we're having the pleasure of having Alberta MP, who went on to be a cabinet minister of 9 portfolios, and then who became the leader of the official opposition in the House of Commons in Ottawa, the Honourable Rona Ambrose. So October 2nd, we'll bring Rona to us in her new capacity as the Deputy Chair of TD Securities. So confidence, I think, is the word there. So how did this young woman enter into national politics, enter into international politics because of responsibilities and the boards that she sits on? And now how is she going into the bigger world of business? So I hope you will join us for October the 2nd. And on November the 6th, it's going to be Jennifer Howlett, who's now the executive director of the Walrus. And I hope many of you had an opportunity to look at the video that Janice did just 5 years ago when she was new to the portfolio of Banff, talking about resilience, but also talking about, again, how the role that art plays in both good times and in bad. So now I would like us to take one more step in building courage, because that was one of the things that Janice mentioned, to be resilient. And that is to have a saying, is to have a motto. And at the Famous Five Foundation, we discovered in one of Emily's diaries that she had written, "I feel equal to high and splendid braveries." So I would like to go through a learning exercise with you and have you say this, mean it, feel it, so that it gives you, as we used to say, an extra arrow in your quiver. So first of all, I will say the phrase in two parts and then ask you to repeat it. I'm hoping too that we might be able to get a visual of this, but maybe that's coming. So the phrase again is, "I feel equal to high and splendid braveries." So I'm going to say it now and ask you to repeat. I feel equal to high and splendid braveries. Can I hear you? Okay. So now the other thing I want to ask you to do is to put your shoulders back and to take a deep breath in and out, because you're getting ready for a challenge and you're getting ready to say, as you will hopefully in the mirror 5 times in the next little while, let's say it together, that we feel equal to high and splendid braveries. I feel equal to high and splendid braveries. And remember, the high and splendid braveries could be things like answering for the 500th time the same question that your family member or friend asks you because they have Alzheimer's. Is that in the cold or in the heat, you go to work, even though you don't like it or you're not feeling appreciated, but you do it because it puts food on your table and a roof over your head and that of your family. That's a very high and splendid bravery. Another high and splendid bravery might be when you hear an insulting, a racist, a sexist comment, and you finally speak up and say that's not appropriate. So high and splendid braveries come in many, many. So now it's up to you to take the pledge. And so I'm simply going to count down from 5 and ask you once again, shoulders back, deep breath, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, say it. Okay, I think you're sort of there intellectually, but you're not there physically or resonating with you. So let's try this again, and in a strong, clear voice, please say high and splendid bravery. So I'm counting down, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Much better, much better. So this brings us to the formal ending of our program today. Great thanks to Janice Price. We know the BAM Center, with your leadership and the way you involve others, is going to soar again, Janice. Big thanks to Vanessa for doing something new, for being brave. She's never interviewed a person, and she's never done it on a national stage. And Vanessa, you did a beautiful job. Our thanks also to Jennifer Vary from Enbridge, and once again to the Cantoray Choir for saying what we all have been thinking and feeling. Our thanks to all the medical heroes that have gotten us through COVID-19, and particularly to the female medical heroes. So have an inspired, a resilient month, and we'll see you on October 2nd. Miigwech, merci, thank you very, very much. Bye-bye.